Hey guys, and welcome to episode 2 of the Windsor Time podcast. I'm Noah, this is Ben, and today we are talking about pre-owned watches, what to look for as a consumer, as a seller. Obviously, you sell watches, I buy watches, so we can kind of tackle it from both perspectives here. But before we get into that, cheers.
Cheers, man.
We have some whiskey for our second episode to celebrate here.
Four Roses confiscated from Casa Suhail, unbeknownst to the owner of the condo's knowledge. But it's delicious.
Cool glasses too. We can kind of talk about from a consumer perspective first, and then maybe get into some insights on the seller side. But just as a base level, when you are buying a pre-owned watch, what's the first? I've always gone off the assumption of you want to buy the seller.
Yeah.
Where do you, when you're looking at buying
if I'm the buyer as an entity at this point?
If you were buying just Ben Simon.
If Ben Simon was buying pre-owned watch.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a lot to be said with things being a full set, box, paperwork, especially if it's a vintage piece, a lot of times if it's been through multiple owners, that type of thing over the years, been through not just multiple owners, but multiple owners who maybe have moved homes, they've lost paperwork, et cetera, et cetera. It's about knowing the person that you're buying it from, but secondarily, does it have that accoutrement with it, if you will. Yeah. And, that certainly helps. But, authentication and the level of, super clone watches out there is always kind of on the back of everyone's mind at this point.
Absolutely.
And I will be honest, as a company, I mean, we have seen times where we are thinking about buying something and we realize, halfway through the process that, hey, something's just not right about this. And by the time you send it in, ideally we have the ability as a company to send it into the brand, if it's a vintage Rolex, if it's a vintage IWC, if it's a modern of any of these watches, we can send it to the brand for authentication, which is great. And we can do that on the behalf of an individual. Yeah. But I think that's stage one is kind of authentication and feeling good about what you're buying. And then stage two is what's the market price, what makes sense for that for both parties. And the markets have been wild these last few years, as we all know. That could be its own episode in a way. It's just how things have priced out and what things are doing as an investment and as just a luxury item. But man, going off on a tangent here. But knowing the buyer is stage one, or knowing the seller, but you don't always know the seller, so you've got to do some digging.
I think as a consumer, on the flip side, when you talked about the complete set, understanding that if you are buying a watch naked or just the head, which I've done before, it can get you a better price, but in trade-in, you're not going to get the same price as something that has a full set of box and papers.
You just have more elements to consider. If you have all the things with it, there's less of a likelihood that it's a fake item because they'd have to fake all these other items. However, it is starting to happen, and we see things. I mean, you see on social media all the time. You see videos of people with Rolex warranty printers printing out these stacks of fraudulent warranties, and you see all sorts of things. So you really have to be careful no matter how complete something is too. So just because something is complete does not mean, just because it has box papers, vintage looking papers, whatever it is, does not mean that it is real, So I don't want to just give everyone a false sense of security.
No, absolutely. And I think kind of the second thing to touch on here is condition. So
absolutely,
case condition and dial condition. As a consumer, I can speak to, on a certain watch, if it is a dive watch or something a little bit more rugged, we'll get into a few watches here in a little bit. You have to understand if it is pre-owned, it will have scratches possibly, unless it's marked as like new, which like new is...
or new old stock, or kind of like a vault find or something.
But it's okay to take the discount if it has scratches, understanding that's what you're getting. And I think as a consumer... there's been pieces that I've picked up that had some scratches, and I just feel like, I'm okay with this level of wear, and I now don't feel afraid to wear it. Whereas whenever I get, the new sub or whatever,
absolutely, if you're the first one hitting it on the door jamb, that's a really painful feeling. Versus the guy or two before you, or the gal or two before you hit it on the door jamb, then they've kind of taken that feeling out.
Absolutely. So from the seller side, on that same point, how big of a role and part does condition have? Case movement, dial,
I think
everything?
It totally depends on who's buying the watch. For example, I think last episode we showed that 1984 GMT Master, which had its original dial, its original handset, indices, everything matched.
Yeah.
There are some consumers that, and I should say it has not been polished. So there's these nice crisp edges to it, which have some wear, but they have these nice lines to them. So there's some consumers that see that and they're just looking for a beautiful Rolex that is super polished, super shiny, looks new, has a bezel that's not faded. They want a perfect red and blue Pepsi, red and blue GMT bezel. Then there's a flip side, other consumer who wants never been touched, sharp edges, has patina from being in the sun, has its all, lume plots, even if they're cracked or missing their original, they've patinaed. So it's all about who's, idealizing what, I guess, at the end of the day. If we're buying it, I would say I would generally be leaning towards not having been polished, having its original patina, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
As opposed to service dial. Some people would say, I love the fact that it has a service dial. It's a newer dial, less fade, no cracking, whatever the situation is with the watch. But other people want that original, piece that came with it. So totally about who's buying what, I guess. But if I was buying something, I would probably want, untouched as best as possible, even if it's been worn hard.
Right.
But, as little wear and polishing on the edges as possible.
Well, and that's interesting because, again, from consumer side, I keep going back to that, but it does really just depend what you want. So I was listening to a podcast recently and they were talking about their experience they'd had with an AD that also had pre-owned in another state. They polished their watches to no end because people in that market wanted shiny watches. So they brought out, they had Daytonas, and it was like, where did the lugs go? The lugs are just gone. But they, in their market, people want some shine on their Daytona. So that's,
and we have, daily, people walking into our physical store and saying, can you refinish my watch? Or can you, a lot of times people actually say, can you service my watch? They don't even mean a mechanical service. They actually just want it refinished. And, if people are trying to do that by the month, just to get out micro scratches and stuff, they are kind of removing material, but to each their own at the end of the day. There's some people that see it as a piece of jewelry and they just want it shiny. There's other people that see it as, they want it with its original edges, and there's no right or wrong there. It's just up to the individual. And it's funny, we're not going to talk about the watch I brought yet, but the watch I brought is a really good example of a few of these things. So I'm excited to talk about that in a little bit.
So you touched on it a little bit there, but the prevalence of fakes now is just wild. Even holding a legitimate, call it Rolex, whatever, next to a super clone now, I feel like, man, is it getting difficult. From a business perspective, you kind of touched on, you can send it into Rolex, you can send it to whoever, but I think it is important as a consumer to educate yourself on some of the different things to look for. So I think with Rolex, you obviously have 2.5 magnification on the date window.
There are things to look for, and I will be honest that I almost don't want to just list them off because I feel like they're changing by the day. And on top of that, the super clones and the fakes out there are getting so good. It's really more of, you've got to get the brand to authenticate the item. And I think that's really the only way to be buying something, unless, if you've worked with an auction house redundantly and that this auction house is totally doing that legwork for you, and you're buying this piece at auction and it's been through the rounds of authentication prior to the auction, that's a safe space for the most part. Still not 100%. You don't know what parts are in the movement, you've not inspected each movement, but if you're just buying something off the street, if you're just buying something off of a social media post, the only way to really authenticate those items is to get the brand to put something on paper for you. And even then, they don't always do that. So it's once again comes down to buying, from someone but even then, it's not foolproof. That's for sure.
And I think it was in December. Didn't we see that? I think it was Phillips or someone. I don't want to drop the wrong name, but there was a Cartier crash that went up for sale, and it was rumored that it was a Franken watch. So it may have had some legitimate parts.
You see things get pulled frequently from auction. Even if there's speculation that something might be, they're just not willing to risk it, so they'll pull it from auction. And you see that from time to time for sure, because it's kind of like I hate to bring up cars, but bring a trailer. By the time that thing is on the site for 7 days at auction, it gets picked apart via the forum. And you sort of see that on some forum and auction sales with watches as well. It gets, things get vetted by the network in a way, but it's still not 100%.
Yeah. Well, and we don't have to touch on it a ton, but we're talking before the podcast. Obviously, Rolex is doing their part. I think Audemars Piguet's done in the past with their certified program to just cut through. And again, you're going to pay usually, I think, a premium, or we'll see.
In theory, I think the CPO program will kind of become the market leader in a way, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be priced at a premium or priced less than other things out there. But we still have yet to see how that's going to play out. I didn't mean to cut you off, but Rolex certified pre-owned is rolling out. It has started as kind of a test run with a few retailers at large scale, larger change. Companies like us, we will see that pre-owned program either second or third quarter this year. Yeah. And once again, I don't want to put the cart before the horse because we have not experienced it yet, but I do think it's going to be disruptive in a good way. I think it's going to set sort of a nice level playing field for the market in a market that's just been constantly in flux. And I think they're going to do their best to protect their brand, but also protect the representatives of their brand that are selling it, and give someone who's buying that CPO watch a little bit more peace of mind that if it has that stamp of approval with that new CPO warranty, that new wax seal, that they're buying something that Rolex has put themselves behind and stands behind.
For sure. Versus
otherwise, you're just really trusting the seller, So it's going to be disruptive, but it's going to be fun to see it roll out and see what it does. And in my opinion, it's almost a third brand for the Rolex, entity. So don't like to use the big R word too much in these things because, but it's such such an amazing company, and always taking a long time to bring something to the table. But when they do, it is done in such a professional, done in the right way that really leads the market. So be interested to see it roll out.
So we've talked, about the different downfalls, but I do think there's a lot to be said for the pre-owned market. One, for availability.
For sure.
And then two, the majority of brands are cheaper on the secondary market, unless you're talking about the big R word or AP, Patek, and I think the pandemic even switched it a little bit, but, there's a lot of value in pre-owned.
We see some brands, that clearly hold their value. We see some brands that it feels like everyone only buys them at secondary market because their value holding is not as strong. And it's kind of an interesting world there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, back, in the day before all of this popped off, outside of Rolex, I, doubt there was ever a discount on new Rolex, but there was kind of an expectation, like you were going into a car dealership. Hey, give me 10 off, give me 15 off.
It's the curse of the jewelry or watch stores that people expect to negotiate because it's kind of in the culture, but even that has changed. But that was very much reality.
Yeah. And now, like you said, I think it's level set. I think it's good. It'll be interesting to see what the market does. I think, neither of us can predict out that far, but yeah, I think a return to normality for us watch nerds to be able to buy stuff would be good. So anyway, why don't we go ahead and jump into our wristwatch type. So what are you wearing?
Absolutely. I am super excited about this one. This is something that was a long time coming. This is our Carolina Watch Club, which Carolina Watch Club is something we can talk about probably on another episode, but our special edition Carolina Watch Club Tudor Pelagos with blue dial, blue bezel. Something that is really near and dear to me and near and dear to a lot of us here in North and South Carolina, because long time coming, but we basically were able to do kind of a partnership watch with Tudor. And it's something that we try not to flaunt too much, to not, show off with the brand, but it was something we felt really accomplished because you don't see something every day, but we actually have our Carolina Watch Club logo on the dial, and it glows, which to our knowledge, it is the first and only glowing logo dial on a Tudor, which is pretty cool.
In our knowledge and opinion, that is what we were stating.
Correct. It may not, we don't know every special edition watch that's been produced, but it was really cool. They did a lot of testing to get our logo both detailed, but also still to glow pretty well. And the fact that they pulled it off was really cool, and had a special moment last Watches and Wonders show where I actually got to see the dial, kind of the demo dial in production from Tudor prior to us finishing the watches. So just to see it all come together and everyone in the watch club kind of get their piece is really cool. It's been fun to be a part of.
What happened? I know there was talk of putting it in like a gel or something. That dial did it have to be destroyed? I know it had to.
Oh, that dial?
Yeah, that.
Yeah,
dial.
I'm sure they either destroyed it or they kept it somewhere. They
archive
wouldn't
somewhere.
let us keep it, but for good reason. They don't want things floating around that are not on finished product. You know, especially when it's something that's kind of a collaboration type thing. And thank you, Tudor, for getting it done, because it was cool, and it's honestly just a great tool watch. It's not small, it's not big, it does everything. You can dive in it, you can just beat it up and feel good about it, you know.
Well, and before we get into what I'm wearing, I was lucky enough, so I passed on it initially. Mistake. And no, well, I did that with the Nomos too. No, you remember I was the next to last person, and then our friend Lisa.
We all make mistakes, you know.
She got it. I've made the mistake twice, and I was lucky enough to get to photograph the release images, which were up and then down. That was a whole thing. But when I was shooting it, I went, oh, I need this watch. So I waited till everybody had their fair chance, and then swooped in. I think by the time this comes out, they're all probably gone. But
that's true.
That is an interesting watch, because I've owned Tudors in the past, and I will say this. That Pelagos and the original size, the real Pelagos, is, in my opinion, the most Tudor. It's not trying to be a vintage sub.
Yeah, that's true.
Like the Black Bay 58 and the Black Bay they reintroduced. You know, it's not trying to be a Daytona. It's not trying to be anything else but a Tudor Pelagos. And
it's
I think
very much its own animal.
It has. It's not like anything else. I mean, it is like other things, but in the Tudor catalog specifically, I think that's such a phenomenal watch, because it has its own true identity. And then when you add the Carolina Watch branding on there, you know, that's or Watch Club branding rather on there, you know, it really brings it into another level.
It's been super cool.
Yeah, I've had a hard time. And then it comes with a cool rubber strap too, which is nice. I played around with it.
And it's titanium, super lightweight for its size and everything. So just great watch for any situation, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And it pairs well with what I'm wearing. I actually
what are you wearing?
Yeah, I held both of them. So I'm wearing my No Date sub. I've had for a couple of years now and love. But the two watches, when I got mine, I kind of was holding both of them and looking at them back and forth. They're very different. You know, that I think is a true tool watch. Well, this is something that started out as a tool watch and is still very capable.
Totally.
But has just moved on to a different thing.
Yeah. Definitely has an elevated status now, but I mean, very much a tool watch in its core, you know?
Absolutely. So it'll be interesting to see beach season, you know, what I'm gravitating towards more. But anyway, why don't we go ahead and jump into our shop picks for the week?
Absolutely.
Kick us off. What do you have?
All right. So this will be fun. So this is a vintage Patek Philippe 3445 in yellow gold, which is a vintage Calatrava. Pretty cool, because it kind of, going back to what we were talking about, this has a blue dial, but this is a service dial.
Yeah.
So this was not originally a blue dial. I believe it was kind of a silver or like an opaline dial. And original client for it, but he ended up having a dial change. He actually wrote Patek, or at least reached out to their service center and requested a blue dial. So it is an original dial to the watch, but he requested it some decades ago to have it changed.
Nice.
So pretty cool in that regard, and just a fun watch. This is, I'm honestly forgetting the exact year, but this watch was made from like early 60s to I think like 1980 or 1981. So let's call it a 70s watch.
Yeah.
Probably early to mid 70s. But beautiful case size, and what's really cool, if you're looking at it, you look at a modern Patek Calatrava, a lot of times if it has that small seconds at 6 o'clock, it's kind of indicative of being a manually wound watch. It's almost, 99% that's the case.
Yeah.
In this case, same setup, 6 o'clock sub-seconds, but it is an automatic watch. And for the 70s, it's got a nice size, automatic movement.
It does.
Just kind of does everything.
Yeah. You know, I brought this. We had a dinner with a couple friends the other night, and I mean, it was funny. There was a box of 10 watches, and everybody
that watch got so much
this.
attention. I know.
And this is, again,
I don't want it to ever sell.
No. Well, and this is something, I mean, definitely buy it. But when talking about pre-owned, I mean, what an incredible entry point to a massive brand,
I think,
for great value.
This is still an expensive item. I think we have it at something like 17 or 17,850.
Yeah.
But, you know, you're looking at other watches out there in the 30s and 40s that are kind of equivalent to this in the new world of Patek Philippe. So
absolutely,
it's a heck of a value and kind of a sleeper, to use that cliche word.
Absolutely.
But, how about you? What'd you bring?
So I've gone the complete opposite direction
less small,
with the Blancpain 50 Fathoms blue dial, blue bezel in titanium on this kind of really cool like navy sailcloth. Again, such a cool watch, you know, a bigger size, but again, I think it works because of the dimension of the bezel to the dial. Really beautiful dial. You almost got kind of like a sector dial-ish thing going on there. That is just killer. And again, great value for money. You're talking about pre-owned. I think you get a lot here for less than retail.
Absolutely.
And I mean, Blancpain, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't this like the OG dive watch? I think it came out slightly before the sub, or roughly at like the same time.
I'm admittedly not Tim Masso, so I don't want to quote that, but that sounds right. I mean, the 50 Fathoms has been in the watch, you know, what's the word, zeitgeist for some time. Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised.
No, and a lot of cool
obviously not in this form and fashion, but
yeah, one of our friends, you know, has the rose gold, and it's a very cool watch. Yeah. So anyway, if it's still up, definitely go and check this out.
That's a cool watch
in the shop. But I think that will probably go ahead and wrap us here. Thank you guys as always for watching, and we'll see you next time.